us and make sure that we have sound here. We're getting some confirmation here. There's a delay though. Awesome. So now we have sound. We're also going to make sure you can see Theodora when she speaks. Thank you all. Theodora, our street food vendor, thank you so much for joining us.
Gracias. Muy buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Teodora Tepexi y hoy estoy aquí con un corazón pesado y una voz llena de indignación después de la votación del Consejo de Comisionados. No puedo evitar sentir una profunda decepción y frustración. La decisión de rechazar las ordenanzas para los vendedores ambulantes en los parques es un golpe para nuestra comunidad y para mí personalmente. Durante más de 20 años he dedicado mi vida a servirles mis tamales, elotes raspados en los parques de Las Vegas. Estos lugares son el alma de nuestra comunidad de vendedores ambulantes. Son donde nos reunimos, donde compartimos nuestras historias y donde ganamos el sustento para nuestras familias. Pero hoy me veo obligada a levantar mi voz en protesta contra la ciudad de Las Vegas por no hacer este proceso accesible para nosotros. Nos han dejado de lado ignorando nuestras preocupaciones y necesidades como vendedores ambulantes. ¿Cómo es posible que una ciudad tan próspera como Las Vegas se nos niegue el derecho a trabajar de manera digna y justa? Esta decisión es un insulto a nuestro trabajo duro y a nuestra contribución a la ciudad. ¿Cómo puede ignorar el papel vital que desempeñamos en la economía local? ¿Cómo pueden menospreciar nuestras contribuciones como pequeñas empresas? Hoy estoy digna y frustrada por la falta de reconocimiento y respeto hacia los vendedores ambulantes como yo. Quiero dejar claro que esta lucha no ha terminado. No nos quedaremos en silencio mientras se nos niega nuestro derecho a trabajar de manera digna y justa. Continuaremos luchando por nuestros medios de vida, por nuestra comunidad y por el respeto que nos merecemos. Agradezco a todos los que han estado a nuestro lado en esta batalla, especialmente a Maker Road, Nevada, por su incansable apoyo y solidaridad que hoy, mientras nos enfrentamos a esta decisión, reafirmamos nuestro compromiso de seguir luchando por un futuro más justo y equitativo para todos en Las Vegas. Gracias a todos.
Muchas gracias, Theodora. Sorry, switching to English. We're going to now take some questions. You all have questions for Senator Doñate.
Mike, that fell.
What kind of changes are you going to seek to the ordinance that was passed today?
Well, so as I mentioned in my remarks, I think there's a lot of unknowns, and this has been a fairly new process for our state, and so things are always changing. You heard remarks from the street food vendors today that their most important thing that they wanted out of this was parks, right? There is a culturally significant portion of this ordinance that could potentially devastate many of these street food vendors. And so we're going to see the effects of that now that the ordinance has been passed, either positively or negatively. The vendors have stated that it's going to affect them negatively. And so we would just have to be mindful as that process continues. And then if the county responds adequately, hopefully we can remediate that in the near term. A lot of my conversations with the county officials have been that they are open to suggestions. They're open to revisiting the ordinance. You heard that from Commissioner Knapp today. And so I would hope that we can work together and make things easier for folks. And then hopefully at some point we have a process where people can get legalized. But I think you're going to notice, depending on how many people get legalized in the beginning, whether or not the ordinance works, right? And so we'll learn that pretty soon. And if our efforts fall short, then we'll take the fight to the legislature.
Which portions of the ordinance would be most restrictive to street food vendors?
So I think in general, there's a consensus, right, that obviously parks were the ones that were the most culturally significant to the Latino community. And so that is something definitely that we will have to look at. The county has stated that through their eyes, right, once these vendors get licensed, that then they would have the ability. So I'm speaking about the county license. Once they achieve the county license, then they can go ahead and apply for the special use permit that food trucks and everyone else has the opportunity to do so. But here's what the problem that I've explained to them multiple times on. That license, that business license, is hindered on the requirements that the health district is imposing. If many of these street food vendors don't have the ability to pay for a $5,000 cart, then many of them are going to go through the process, apply, and not get the license to begin with. And then they won't be denied, they're going to be denied the access to the parks to begin later on. I think those are the things that we need to be watchful of. Ultimately, what I don't want is a situation where now we've devastated these families. These families lost their only source of income simply because we didn't do our homework in addressing what the community wanted. So that's kind of the reiteration of what problems still exist.
Can I make the question in Spanish for todo el mundo? Yeah. ¿Qué sigue después de esto? ¿Cómo va a seguir la lucha y el mensaje hoy para la comunidad de vendedores ambulantes?
Hoy tenemos la oportunidad del condado, la comisión del condado de Clark County, hoy tenían la decisión de pasar la ordenanza que va a ayudar a los vendedores ambulantes a aplicar para una licencia para que puedan estar legalizar aquí en nuestra ciudad. Estamos hoy en un momento que estamos mirando que muchos de los vendedores ambulantes estaban diciendo que si no tienen el acceso a los parques, que a lo mejor van a llegar a un momento que no pueden a sobrevivir. Entonces, en los siguientes más meses vamos a mirar qué es lo que va a pasar con la ordenanza y además si los vendedores ambulantes pueden aplicar. Pero sabemos que muchos miembros de la comunidad latina, que nosotros crecemos, que vamos al parque y compramos de los vendedores ambulantes, en este momento ya no van a tener esa oportunidad.
Pero la lucha sigue.
Pero la lucha sigue.
Are you concerned about any confrontation between Metro and the street vendors?
Thank you so much for that question. From the very beginning, we've worked with Metro hand in hand. And, I'm very thankful for the partnership that we've had from the very beginning. I know it's been very difficult, but you have to remember that from the beginning of this bill, we were catching up to a process and a behavior that already existed in our county, in our city, in our state. And so while the process has been slow, we've learned a lot. I, for one, am excited because, we have a good relationship with our sheriff, and we are working hand in hand to ensure that the vendors know the rules and the regulations that are imposed and that they're living up to those standards. And I think that's also the commitment that the vendors have provided from the very beginning.
So what are the next steps going to be like? I remember at one point they said, well, the food needs to be cooked in a commercial kitchen. They can't be cooking from their house, and there was back and forth with that. What is that going to look like now with these street vendors and this all being legalized?
I greatly appreciate that question. Having a public health background as a chair of the Senate Health and Human Services Committee, I have a differing opinion from the health district. During our last meeting that we had in HHS, I encourage all of you to go back to the records because they admitted on the record that they have slow walked the process of updating the regulations for many of these vendors to be able to achieve the proper licensure. The unfortunate reality is that a lot of these requirements are going to have to come down to how we address cottage food regulations in NRS, in our state statutes. We've seen similar processes. Arizona just passed their updates on cottage food. California did the same thing most recently, and so we will have to do the same process during the next legislative session, and so there's still a lot of work to be done. My only word of advice to the health district is to do your job. Go meet the community where they're at, help these vendors get licensed, actually do the work that you need to be entrusted to, which is to serve the public, to protect public health. And that starts by creating a process that treats these vendors where they're at. We meet them, we help equip them with the resources, the financial resources to get these actual carts and move from there.
One more question for you. A lot of these street vendors are Latino, right? And there's a language barrier just in going to talk with people. Maybe they don't necessarily know what's happening, what the process has been like. What is your, approach in making sure that the vendors out on the streets are well aware of what's happening and the steps that they need to take?
Yeah, thankfully my office has had a wonderful relationship with both the cities and the counties. We've worked together to implement communication plans and making sure that people are understanding of the rules in place. As you may have known from covering this issue, street food vending was illegal prior to the ordinance being passed. The bill set forth the pathway for it to be legalized throughout the state. The ordinance allows them the ability to finally apply to become legal in Clark County and in Washoe County. And so my ultimate goal, of course, is to ensure that the ordinance works in place, that people are following the law as we intended, and of course, to make sure that these vendors all know that there are processes that now they have to abide by. And then hopefully in the near term, we can see the pathway which we've always achieved in dreaming of, which is there's a pathway for a street food vendor to become a food truck owner, to become a restaurant owner, and live the American dream.
Take 2 more questions.
Senator Doñate, with a lot of these vendors now being pushed out of areas like parks and churches, is there any sort of concern for their own public safety? I know during the meeting we heard stories of people who have been robbed and assaulted while working kind of on the outskirts of town. So could you speak to some of that in the future steps for this bill?
Yeah, again, I want to reiterate that parks have always been culturally significant to the Latino community. 1 in 3 residents in Clark County are Latino. And so it's important for us to recognize that many of these vendors are Latino, and that when we impose restrictions on their way of living, that can have a devastating consequence. We heard these vendors talk about that the only way that they can access funds is by vending near parks and schools. And so today we took that away from them. And so it's going to be an interesting process, of course, to see what are the ramifications that exist. But again, my priority is ensuring that they have a legalized pathway, and we will work hand in hand with the county to ensure that happens in the near term.
What's Reno doing right?
Well, to start off, I think that there's obviously variances in different jurisdictions in different counties. I'll give you one example of what they're doing right. The health district, Northern Nevada Public Health, has allocated funds to helping their vendors up in Northern Nevada access food carts. They have established a food cart vending program through the funds that they received through Senate Bill 118. The Southern Nevada Health District has not. The Southern Nevada Health District needs to do their job and help these vendors get access to funds so that they can become adequately licensed as we have intended them to. They received $11 million. We worked. That was my bill. Senate Bill 118 was my bill to help the health district receive funds to address the public health needs. Go ask them, why haven't they allocated any funding towards helping these vendors? If this is such a big public health concern, which they've alluded to, which they've told all of you guys to, why haven't they given no ounce of funding to these street food vendors, either in a public health messaging campaign, in a campaign to help purchase food carts, in a campaign to help educate them on the laws and regulations? That, to me, is something that Northern Nevada is doing better than Southern Nevada, and it needs to be addressed pretty soon.
We're good. Thanks so much, everyone.